Today's going to be a lot of me talking, but we do start an in-class today. So the in-class is going to be, I'm going to say the materials gathered for it, and then on Tuesday we're going to delve a little bit deeper into it because we're not going to get to the selection tools today. So we'll get the bulk of everything today and then finish up. And this is just for the basics, of course. We're just skimming the surface with this. But then on Tuesday, we'll do a little bit more and then hop into our in-class. Let me get the display on. All right. Maybe I'll get the display on. How's that? All right. So when we're in the land of Photoshop, and you can go into that other room. Yeah, it might lock, so just, if you need to come back over, just knock. Someone will let you in. For getting started in our friend Photoshop, you're going to notice right off the bat similarities within that interface. So if you open up InDesign, if you open up Illustrator, if you open up Photoshop, they all look relatively the same, so you should be able to navigate this already since we're relatively comfortable with it. We can go ahead and create a new. The one thing that's a little bit different here is Photoshop does have other presets defined to it. We have our saved, so this is if you're working at a newspaper, say for example, and you're working with columns instead of inches. This is the area where you would save a preset. Let's say you're doing a 2x4, which is a 2 column by 4 inches. You could save that there if it's something different than our standards. That way you don't have to make that file every time. Our photo sizes, and I'm just going to click on the view all presets because I know some of you either will be taking or have taken digital photography. Who has taken it yet, out of curiosity? You have? Okay, in high school. What about going to be taking it here, out of curiosity? You're taking it right now? Okay, so he probably has you in a couple programs, but you're probably in Photoshop for some of them. You haven't started yet? Lightroom? Photoshop. To have you in Bridge? Okay, so yeah, that's the other one. So like with photo edits, it depends on one, who you're learning under, and two, what you're planning on doing. So like if you're shooting weddings, most people will start using image editing through Bridge just to make sure the files are set up, etc. Because no one wants an angry wedding party. I would never, good luck if you do it, basically. You'll make a lot of money. How's that? But it is a lot of stress. So we have what I'm going to lovingly call the preset snapshot style. This is the ones that would fit in the frames. The 4x6, the 5x7s, the 8x10s. Bless you. And you can see it comes with the color modes and everything already set up. The print menu, we are already used to it. This is exactly the same as in Illustrator. For our practice run today, you can choose any of those. I don't care if it's landscape, portrait, doesn't matter. I don't care if you're tabloid, letter, any of these. What's nice with Photoshop, it gives you all the A, B, C's, and also, a D. So remember, the A's through D's are the international sizes. Ours are these first couple here. Art and illustration, for those of you who are more on the illustration side of things or are interested in, like if you look at your Illustrator YouTuber people and they're like, we're making a postcard set today. This is the area they sort of live in. Or the posters, or what else do they have? Looks like more web style grids that would talk to your iPads. Something we did not talk about yet in Illustrator is both of these programs are applicable for building web prototypes. So if you get into web design, you sort of have, well, when you're a student, you're learning both of them, but once you're out in the field, you sort of decide which section are you interested in, front end or the back end, which is more developer oriented. If you're more in the front end, you're going to be building those mock-ups, and you can do those in Photoshop or you can do them in Illustrator. My one friend who freelances, all she does is make the front end for every website that she gets in. She packages those files up, sends them to the devs, and then they actually do the building from what hers looks like. So she works through Photoshop because it seems to do what she needs to do, but you're going to find yourself leaning towards having a preference of one versus the other, and then it's just going to depend. Do you want to build it in Illustrator or do you want to build it in Photoshop? What I do recommend is just, it says web most common. I would say stick to that in the early stages, because you can see they have like the small 13-inch MacBooks or the 27s, which is what we're looking at now. When I teach the web classes where I was at before, people would design, and I sometimes am guilty of this also because I forget, I designed for the 27 iMac, and then when you smush it up into a smaller screen, you're like, ooh, this looks really cluttered. Or adversely, if you were working on a smaller screen, you forget that it's big, and then you have way too much space. So the most common, that standard one, is going to be the happy middle ground for that one. So this is one of the few times I'm like, I know we have all these, however, this one does give us the flexibility between both monitor views. If you're building prototypes and mock-ups for web, you're probably also going to be doing them for the mobile versions also. This is pretty standard at this stage. One thing that's really nice, and I don't know if we have it on here yet, is there's, oh, this mouse, Adobe XD. Ah, yep, we have it. I'm going to guess for mobile prototyping, since this was just released. I can't remember if I was in the beta, the last patch, or if that's when it actually came out. It might have already been out the last time, but now it's like more fully functioning. I'm going to guess XD is going to take this over, because you can actually navigate it and get a live preview, which you aren't going to get with Photoshop. So for you who are interested in web, might want to start playing around with XD. It's one of those, and I'm sure you've all heard of them, the WYSIWYG, what you see is what you get prototyping model. So if you need a button, you put the button on there and it does the job. It's really a simplified prototyping device, so you can pretty much just log in and start doing stuff, and it makes instant sense. Whereas this, you're going to be building everything from scratch. Whereas the other one's going to give you like, here's your buttons you can choose from, and then you can do more beyond that, but it does give you some presets and templates. And for those in film and video and all that, Photoshop does do, on a limited scale, some film and video bits. So you can see it has like what I'm going to call like, if you are into Twitch streaming, maybe it's that, be right back, getting ready. And it'll just be this little quick looped animation. That's what Photoshop can be really useful for. Also, if you wanted to make, say, an animated GIF. Side note on that, I literally don't care about the GIF and GIF debate. I don't care what you say. I don't fall into that rabbit hole. I will let y'all know, old school me does say GIF. If you hear GIF in your head, go for it. I don't care. So I don't get into the semantics with that one. That one's just the weird internet debates that I'm just like, no, I'm just going to stay away from that one. So if you do get interested in that, this program is really fun to use that. In Design 2, I will be introducing a project where it is partially two-dimensional, and then the second part of it is we're going to do a little bit more movement with it. So the animation capabilities are really limited, but it's like anything else. If you spend a lot of time on it and you're interested in it, you can make magic happen. And what's nice, all those presets are on there. But long story short, today we're going to work on a print document. I am temporarily going to leave it in RGB mode, even though print is CMYK. Some of the stuff that we're going to do, for some reason, Photoshop has never changed this. Some of the filter galleries only work if it's RGB. And it makes no sense. So what I end up saying is, one, if you're not going to use filters in any capacity, switch it now to CMYK. If this is something you dabble in, leave it at RGB, and right before you were to send it to press, your second copy, just shift it to a CMYK document. So that would be like a last step thing. If you're printing here, it really honestly won't matter if it's RGB or CMYK. Home printers assume people don't know about color. So if you design in CMYK, it's like, sure, this looks right. Or if you design in RGB, it's like, yeah, that looks right too. It'll sort of course correct it for you. If you're going to get it professionally printed at, say, an offset printer, so like HBP in Hagerstown, Graphics Universal up in Waynesboro, wherever your offset printers are in this area, they're the ones that go through the rollers. each one has an ink tray that is CM, Y, or K. It has to be CMYK for that, or it's not going to print. So just know while you're working, yes, you can keep it in RGB mode, but the last step you do before you send it is change it to CMYK. In this class, I'm going to be somewhat flexible with that. When we get to InDesign, in the next level, if you keep going that way, you have to have it CMYK. I deduct points when it's in level 2 if it's not CMYK. So it's just one of those things at the end. If you want to get into the habit, just convert it at the very end to CMYK, and I will show you how to do that right here. You have a couple ways to do this. This default is our Windows, or I guess it's the Essentials Classic, which is the default, which is actually pretty decent. So Window Workspace, you can see it has a 3D workspace, motion, painting, photography, graphics, and web. So just like an Illustrator. Now we have slightly less than an Illustrator, but you do have these presets. If you're like, I'm going to be mostly web, it'll shift it to what you'll mostly need for the web programming. Or photography, what would I need for that? Well, yes, you're going to definitely need your histogram, and you're definitely going to need your layers. So it does, I do think the Essentials Classic is much better in Illustrator. The new Essentials that they want you to use is really watered down and not in a good way. But the Essentials for Photoshop is actually pretty right on. You have everything for the most part that you're going to need right off the bat. Same dealio as Illustrator. Tools on the left, palettes on the right, and your menu with extra goodies here at the top. Your palettes on the right can all be found here, just like an Illustrator, under your window. So if you're like, ooh, where's my type? You're like, all right, here it is. So I always talk about type first in Photoshop, which is kind of strange because that's not what it's known for. This is the only one of those programs that does not call it type. It calls it character, which was its old school name. So if you're looking for the type, it's, yeah, paragraph is part of it, but the actual typography is under the word character. Now this comes with a caveat. If you're designing something in print, I would really say do not do this part in Photoshop. Pop it into Illustrator or pop it into InDesign and finish the type there, because your type's going to be super clear. This is that bitmap program, so it's going to have a really, and people think they can pull it off. We can tell. How's that? Like, once you know what you're looking for, you know where the type was done. It looks feathery and soft on the edges, and you're like, which is, for web, you will not have this problem. It's going to look perfect for web. Once it prints, it does this little weird fuzzy matrixing stuff to it. So that's why, now for our in-class today, which we're going to start, it does have a type component. It's fine for this. This is a little like warm-up to get you used to it. But if it's a finalized project, do it in another program. So just so that we can have a sort of, let's just do a zoom out so we can see where these courses head. So for this, we're learning the absolute basics. This is just what Illustrator does. This is the absolute basics of Photoshop. Then when we start getting into InDesign, and also in like Design 2 or 3, if you keep going, these programs, you will very rarely just work with one. You will have them all up at the same time. So if I need to do a page layout that's a 20-page flyer for brochure style, the images, all of them are going to be done in Photoshop. And then I'm going to bring them into InDesign, and I'm going to do my type. But I need a graphic element that's illustrated. Well, I do that in Illustrator. Then I bring that into InDesign. So he's doing a project because he's done this, but we didn't know how to do the skip stuff here. So he's doing the astronaut thing. The astronaut body was designed in Illustrator. Then you open that into Photoshop and do your crazy effects. So they all start talking. Or I'll build something in Photoshop, go, okay, but now I need to do something in Illustrator. Open that in Illustrator, and then they talk back and forth. But you can't do that until you know what each one does independently. So that's sort of where we're at now. So yes, it does type, but the other two programs do type way better. For now, we're not at the worrying about tracking, kerning, leading stage yet. We're going to be getting that towards the end of the term. So this is our leading, tracking, and kerning. So this is those fiddly bits when it comes to, like if you're in Word and they're like, you need space and half, that's our leading basically. So that gives you more space between the lines. Tracking is a whole word and you just air it out a little bit. And leading is the super tiny points. Like if I write my last name Redding, sometimes the two D's get a little too close and you just have to put a space in between them. That does in between characters themselves, hence the character palette name. So these, do not worry. I promise you we will get to those and you'll be worrying about them for the rest of your design life. So for now, we don't have to quite worry about it. What we are worrying about is the type, and do you want it regular, bold, italic, and then what size? And remember, these are just the default sizes. You can put your cursor in here and up and down arrow to whatever you want. So you don't have to stick to the preset. Like if you're like, I need more than 72 points, what do I do? Just put your up arrow in and it's fine. You can make it 3,000 points if you were really like itching for a giant typeface. That's fine. Now remember, it's like Illustrator. It will remember. So I'm just going to take it back to the 12. So when we do the demo, I don't scare myself, basically. You can strip palettes off if you don't want them. So this one's interesting if you want to look at extra tutorials. So there it is. All of our, it's a tour, it's the layers, how to just select. These are nice. They're also on the Adobe main website under their tutorials. You can close it if you want. If you're like, darn, I really wish I had that Learn tab again, you can bring it back up. You can click hold on this. You can drag it into the library so you can see it's going to go in this little window. So they're going to be sort of stacked side by side. Or when I tear it out and I get just the blue line, that means it's going to go on top of that. So just like in Illustrator, we can slide it wherever we want, or we can just simply get rid of it. That's fine. For me, for here, and this is interesting because Photoshop has the 2-pane. You can downsize these if you want. There we go, because that looks a little unwieldy. At home, my libraries, I always do leave up because it's linked to my personal account. And all of those, remember the Adobe Capture, it was like, here's all my colors, here's all my palettes, here's the patterns, here's the brushes. This is where they're all going to show up once you have everything synced. I don't have my home account synced through here, so right now, I'm like, I don't really need the library because I'm not going to use it at work because I don't want to sync anything. So I'm just going to close that one, and that gives me a little bit more room. So you can leave them up, you can ignore them, you can close them, it doesn't matter. Just know that at the end of the day when we do our restart, it's just going to bring it back up, and you'll just have to do it every time. And that's somewhat normal on a network, so if you work for a large company, you might have to do that anyway. The colors, the swatches, the gradients, and some patterns, they all exist up here. So you can sort of navigate through each of them. This functions exactly like it did in Illustrator. And as well, we have our double click over here. And then you have your Roy G. Biv slidey with your 100%, and then your tints and your shades. So everything is in about the same spot as we're used to. And just a side note, you can, of course, collapse or expand our toolbar accordingly. And it does the same thing. It stacks things that it thinks belongs together. I'm just going to shrink this so we don't see that right now. Properties, in this early stage, you can say, yeah, you know what? I want it to go landscape or portrait. We can take it back. You can change, and since we shrunk that down, we lost some of this. You can change at the end the CMYK, and it's going to be like, are you sure? Yes, we are. So you can switch it up there. You can change the fill. Your background can now be black or transparent if you are into web design and you need to make that button and make that button look like it's floating. This is where you go for that. So there is a lot of use for that. Or you can, I'm just going to switch these so this one makes sense. Change it to your background color. So whatever is on the background is going to show up. So in Illustrator, this was the fill and stroke, and in Photoshop, it is foreground, background. So if I want to paint, whoops, don't double click. If I want to paint and I want it to be the red, you have to make sure that's the color you're choosing. So we can do our brushes and paint with these. Our brushes, since we're talking about it, let's go for it. Main brushes is the one I'm going to show first. You can see it has a brush, it has a little number, and it has these modes and opacities after it. If I click on this part where it has the 13 is just saying this is a 13 pixel brush. If I wanted a really, really big brush, and it's going to give us the preview, If I wanted a really, really big brush, this is where we're going to change it. So right now it's on the softest. So it's on the softest. It's 0% hard. If I want a polka dot, which is 100%, you're going to have to change it to the 100%. If you don't want it to be 100% opacity, turn it down. Boom, boom. This is going to give you your overlays and your overlaps. This is kind of nice if you are what I'm going to refer to as a painterly painter, like the watercolors where you want the colors to look like they're overlaying. So I'll grab another color just so it makes more sense. And you can sort of see how it's interacting with that background and then whatever's happening on top, so you can get these really nice overlays that are subtle. If you start painting, you're like, that's not blue, what's going on? Just make sure you change it back up to that opacity so then it goes back to the 100%. This is a really large brush. Let's change it back down to a more normal size. You can see that they have generalized brushes. They have dry media brushes. So these are more like the pastels. Let's make it just slightly bigger. So if we want it more of a pastelish look, we can get that. And then we can, of course, blend it if we change our opacity. So we can make it look like we're actually building up the layer of whatever media is we're interested in. Wet media brushes, this should be the oils, the watercolors, the inks. Let's just pick this one and just see what it does. Hot pink. Oh, we want it to be 100%. Ooh, we're going to blow up the computer today. All right, so that one's a little bit slow. What's nice with all of these, I don't know who here has the, because there's a lot of people who have been talking about, they have the iPads and the pencils and all that. These brushes are already synced with it. So if you're using Fresco already, you already are using these. So there we go. Oh, that looks great. Fabulous. So anyway, this is all in that land of explore, and then our special effects. And I'm just going to sort of grab that corner and we can pull it down. So if we wanted to have a halftone sort of pattern to it, and I'm just going to zoom in so we can see it, it'll actually paint in that halftone. If you zoom in, it's the same thing. Command 0 will reset it. Plus zooms in, negative zooms out. I just cleared everything. There we go. And the space bar, just like in Illustrator, is going to navigate us through it. So we're already used to all of those. Okay, I'll go back to the 0. One thing you're going to notice is I'm working on just the background layer right now. When you work on the background layer, that's it. Like wherever you're painting, if you're on a photo or if you're on the type or what have you, that stays as it is. So it sort of literally locks it down on whatever layer you're working on. So if you want to have flexibility, it's these layers that make Photoshop sort of, remember how we said the pen tool is sort of what makes Illustrator Illustrator? It's the layers that makes Photoshop Photoshop-ish. So it's the same as the layers in Illustrator. I'm going to make a new layer. So if I wanted a really weird bright green, really crazy halftone brush, really crazy. Oh, that's a little too crazy this morning. All right. All right, so we're going to put these weird halftones on it, which green and red's going to look really sort of weird, and some polka dots, why not? And you can see it more when we zoom in. It is doing the halftoning. This allows for a little bit of flexibility. I could move them around. One of your best friends in this program is going to be, and you'll probably want to write this down, free transform, which is Command T for transform. So you can scale it down, you can scale it up if you didn't like that one weird bloopy thing there, which I did not. So free transform will also rotate it. So maybe you're like, well, I want it to look more like this, or like this, or like this. A little crooked. Let's make it a little crooked. Yeah, that's feeling okay. Return will lock it into place, or you can double click it. Free transform, you're going to use a lot in this program. So that's one of those, and it's under edit, I think. Edit, yep, free transform. Once you get used to these, you'll eventually forget sort of where they're at, but edit is going to do all your sort of moving arounds, etc. And you can see we have others here. So you could, under just the regular transform, scale it, rotate it, skew it, distort it, perspective it, the free transform is going to give you those options in between. It also has a warp, the rotates, and it also will do flips horizontally and vertically depending on what you are looking for in your design. The move tool will move whatever is on that layer around, so you'll have a little bit more navigation behind it. I'm going to reset it so we can see it. So why I also like these things on separate layers is so that I have flexibility within the layer styles. Now we're going to go into layer styles more in depth later, but I like you guys to know about it pretty much right off the bat. Most people are like, it's Photoshop, let's jump right into filters. Ugh, you can smell a filter. Okay, there's nothing wrong with filters. But let's say I want to make it look like a watercolor, and all I do is literally put the watercolor filter on. Oh my God, you can smell those a mile away. What makes that special and unique is what I would ask you. How many different filters can you do is more my question with that. And where the magic comes isn't necessarily with that filter, which honestly you'll probably hardly ever touch unless you're doing some weird effect. Where you're really going to be doing the dance is in these layers. So instead of normal, our layer styles, now we did have these in Illustrator. They call them transparencies there, and they only give us like 6 of these. But there are a lot more of them. You can dissolve it. You can darken it. I'm just going to say right off the bat, I've been doing this program since like 95. I can't remember what they all do. I know I love multiply, I like screen, and I use overlay a lot. Those are the 3 I sort of default to. You're going to find your favorites. You're going to remember what they do. What I usually recommend is just like get this box, activate it, and then use your up and down arrows to be like, what does this one? Ooh, I like these 2. Those are interesting. All right. And then you just keep sort of chugging through them while you're working. And this is just part of that process. Like, that's kind of interesting. And you just sort of go, oh, I like where that one's at. I'm going to use saturation. And then you click on the saturation, and then it stays in that mode. So if Photoshop is essentially a digital darkroom, the background portion of our layers, this is the photo, the actual photo that you're working on. The layers on top of it is a transparency. So it's like a negative. And you're laying it on top of the photo, and it's doing these weird blendings to whatever the photo has going on behind it. So it's going to depend on, what effects do you want, if any. You don't even have to have it at the full opacity. You can dim it down just a little bit so we can barely see them, or you can leave it at the 100%. This is the area I often challenge you guys. This is the one you're going to play around with a lot just to sort of see what they do. Because when we start getting photos involved in about 8 seconds, this is where the game starts changing a little bit. So for photos, let's talk about it. Most people are like, I'm going to grab my photo off of Google. I always demo with cats. So let's look up cats. Okay, I like this one. Why can't I use Grumpy Cat? Copyright, yay! The other groups didn't answer, so +1 to all of you who yelled out. So yes, it's copywritten. Google, grabbing from Google is like a no-no, and it's one of those bad habits that we sort of have to break ourselves from in the early stages. So I typically recommend, and I'll get you guys probably by tomorrow at lunchtime, a whole list of other image sites that are good to use. So like we said, with Font Squirrel is for our typefaces that are 100% commercial use. Same thing, Pexels, Morguefile, some of the Getty images and the Creative Commons. These are the areas where you can use these and be okay with it. Where there's like the, let's say it's a band album, and I had this last semester for Green Day. The one guy wanted to do his album for Green Day, but it was his version of it, but he had to use the, Billy Armstrong had to be in there. You're like, ah. So it's a student project that will never be made money off of. There's kind of an asterisk, like don't sell it ever. But if you're using it to learn something and you're altering it and making it your own, that could be used as a reference model. I'm just going to say right off the bat, maybe just avoid all of that in general. One thing that people don't often know about is there's another section under images called tools. This is where we can actually sort of look and see, like, is there anything that I could use? So this one's labeled, so usage rights. This one's not filtered. It's giving you everything. It's all of it is a sort of a hodgepodge. Labeled for reuse with, you can modify it. That's okay if you modify it. Labeled for reuse, labeled for non-commercial reuse with modification and non-commercial. So it's the non-commercials, it's like the student ones, like, it's only going to be in your portfolio. Okay. But I do want to talk about this one because this is usually the one that everyone's like, well, this says I can reuse. Okay, that it's the internet. So anyone can say, oh yeah, Grumpy Cat's my photo. I took it. Sure, I waive my rights. Flickr is the old school Instagram. Some of those we do have rights waived. So just like, let's just look at it. Okay, see, here's a problem. Some rights are reserved. All right, this is the Commons, Creative Commons attribution. I can share and distribute, and I can adapt this one. Okay. This one, though, I do have to give credit, and if I do something with it and share it, it's going to go under these rules also. So you can see where this becomes problematic. You're managing each of these then. So for this one, yes, you can use it, but you have to afterwards, it's also going to be in the same attribution mode. So, okay. So maybe I don't quite want to use that one. Flickr, and I can't remember where it's at. I'm going to be completely honest because I don't go here too much anymore. There is an area here somewhere where they do have a Creative Commons. So you can look. I'm just going to see if I can just type in cat and maybe it'll show up. Any license, here it is. Commercial use allowed. So this is the photographer, when they're uploading it, they're saying, yes, you can use this cat commercially. Why not? They've waived it. It's a-okay. So Creative Commons has some flexibility, but just because it's under Creative Commons doesn't mean it's good for commercial. So you sort of have to start paying attention to those commercial rights. Let's make sure they really did. Okay, yeah, that one looks pretty good. They did the generic one. So here's where it gets fussy. Let's say, and I'm sure you all have seen it, you do something that's of Frozen 2. I don't know. I don't watch movies. Disney. I promise you Disney's paying attention. How's that? And Disney, while they're friendly and all that, if you do something and sell it, they're going to be like, no, no, no. And they're probably either going to do a forced strike takedown or they're going to sue you because they have money and they don't care. And that can cripple an independent artist. So I'm like, just avoid anything like that. Check your things. I don't like to scare people, but it's like, just be careful with this early on. Wiki is sometimes okay. And it's the same thing. Like, you have to sort of look, okay, so they said it was in the public domain, and this one's saying, no, it's not. You have to credit this person or email them. So even that gets a little bit hazy because these are showing up as able for reuse, but that one technically isn't. So you can micromanage this. This is totally fine. Keep a notebook so that you know where they're coming from, or just use these sites and you don't have to worry about it. And you can see some of these were coming from, so Pexels pulls from Pixabay. So you're going to see Pexels here. So they do come up on here. Those are going to be fine. So when I type in cat, you're probably going to see, there he is right there. These are the ones that they are okay. It's the font squirrel of the photos. Morgue file is the dead files of Photoland. So we'll do cats here also. This one's a little bit different because it is former iStock photos, but it's also Joe Schmo with a digital camera taking a snapshot of their cat with the winky eye in the garden. So you have to curate morgue file a little bit more, whereas Pexels, the curation for the most part has pretty much been done. So I can just go, yes, I like that cat. And let's grab one more cat. And like Pinterest, it's going to say, oh, you liked this one? Well, then you might like these also. Sure, I'll take this one. Free download. And you just keep going down the rabbit hole. So once you find one you like, they will just start sort of feeding you stuff that you're like, and now you might like these, and then you'll like. So I'm going to recommend Pexels for our projects, except for this next in class, because we have a generated one there, so we don't have to worry about it so much. So let's say I want cats on this beautiful background. All right, I'm going to slide this to the side just so that we can see some of our Finder. And I'm going to go into my downloads. All right, you have a couple ways, of course, of opening these, and it's going to depend on your preference. I am going to say right off the bat, if you click and drag it in, yes, it is going to open, but look how bad this looks. Don't do the pull and grab. You're not getting a good photo. You'll want to do the download, and then what you do is once it's in the download, you click hold, and you can drag it onto that icon, and it opens it as a new tab. You can go to File, Open, or Command O. Oh, as everything freezes. And you can open it this way. Or you can right click, and ours is defaulted to open with preview, so you're going to have to open with Photoshop. So either click drag, File Open, or right click Open with. Any of those systems will work well for you. Before we get set loose, we have one more section I want to go over quickly. The modes, if I said, change it to CMYK at the end, as well as changing it here in properties, you can change it under mode CMYK. That would be your last step. So image, mode, CMYK. What we're going to play around with today, though, is some, not all, of the adjustments. So these are the ones that say, I want to take some of these photos and, make them look a little better. Maybe I took a photo in the rain the other day, and it's just a little too grayscale, and I need to boost some of the contrast. So we're going to go over brightness, contrast, curves, exposure, vibrance, and probably color balance if we have time. So brightness, contrast. And let me expand this again. I do this by extremes, all the way bright, all the way dark. And then you sort of have to say, okay, I think I like it here. How do I know that I was asked? You go by what looks good for you. This is your aesthetics. This is your personal database working for you, going, this looks good, this does not look good. How do I make it look good? And there's only one way you can do it. It's just by practice, by looking, by seeing, and getting more info into your own personal database. I'm just going to reset the 0 for the demo. All the way up contrast, all the way down contrast. So it's going to give us a little bit softer appearance. So maybe for mine, I'm like, I want it a little bit less bright, but a little bit more. Yeah, more contrast. I feel happier with that. If you're not seeing it, just make sure that preview is checked so that you can see it. All right, then maybe you'll be like, all right, I'm not going to show you levels quite yet. I show you curves first, and then next week we go over levels. All right, so for curves, this is telling it how is the exposure. If you're doing a black and white darkroom, because I know like 1 or 2 of you did it, you're looking to see where's the brightest spot of the paper and the darkest exposed part of the paper. This is exactly the same thing. This is you sitting at the enlarger, figuring out, what is the aperture going to be and what is the timer, basically. So I'm going to Command plus just so we can zoom in a little bit on the guy. So I keep it open up on the side and I sort of work over here. We have these little eyedroppers. This is the first version of how you use curves. And I usually go over curves because most classes goes over levels. That's what they cover. And everyone's like, what's curves? So I tend to let the photo people do the levels because it's more histogram. Well, there's a histogram one here too. But I like to show you curves so you can get really specific points and how to use it with print publishing. So for this, I'm going to try to find my darkest point that I'm like, I want this to be the ink. All right, that actually looks pretty good. It was pretty close. Maybe I wanted that to be the ink instead. So it'll dull everything down to that point. And now I need to find the highlight. Now what's nice, if you do the extremes, you don't have to worry about the midpoints because it's finding it automatically for you. And let's just say, and I know this is the bright spot, so I would have stayed there, but let's say I want it to come over a little bit more. Woo! Now that's the white point and everything balances off of that. I'm going to cancel it. Command M is curves so that you can find it. I'm going to do a more normal photo of it. All right. So Yeah, that was actually pretty okay with that one. You can also do it by dragging the sides. I'm going to do super extreme. So this is saying everything from this point onward in the photo file, so all of this in the histogram is now white or dark or a little darker. So you can navigate this and adjust it accordingly. So adversely, the darkest or the darkest. So you have more control over this. You can do, there are also custom presets, so you can experiment with these. I'm going to hit OK. No, I'm going to hit cancel. And one more time. But what's kind of different with curves, so right now how we've been using it is really similarly to levels. But let's say you want to go all sorts of crazy and make a really weird, experimental, trippy, psychedelic 70s, 60s sort of polarized look. Now there is a polarized filter in here, or you can control it yourself. So on this bar, you can add extra points. How many points? I don't know. Go for it. This is you experimenting. So let's say I want this one to go crazy. Oh yeah, that looks pretty crazy. That was crazier than yesterday's. But then maybe I want this one to go down. And then maybe I want one more point, and I want to see what happens when it does this sort of like sort of look to it. And you're like, why on heaven's green earth would I want my photo to look like this? Here's where these can get interesting, and I'm going to hit OK. Maybe it's not the photo you're interested in. Maybe it's a section of the photo, because look what weird stuff is happening up here now. If you select something and you're like, you know what, this would make an amazing background. Spoiler alert, this would not make an amazing background, but let's pretend it would. I can copy it. I can take it into our weird piece, free transform it, and now we have this really weird background that we made that only we made. This doesn't exist anywhere else. And where did this come from? This really weird photo of a tabby cat. So you can make these really cool patterns, or whatever magical thing is happening here with that sort of solar edge, or maybe we liked this grid system down here. Something nice is happening there. This is when it's a lot of fun, if you want to make something that's more unique and yours. But let's pretend we do want the cat, because why not? It's a crazy cat. We might as well go with it. And we want to take this cat and we want to put it in this other document. We want a crazy, multi-layered document on our first one. So I want both cats in that. You can drag it in. It's going to make it a smart object. But if you want to do it what I'm going to lovingly call the easiest way, do a Command A to select all, copy it, and then just paste it into this one. Then your free transform. Can you see how often you're going to use this? A lot. You can free transform it up. If you're on an older edition, hit return to set it. You have to hold your shift key down. I reverted my computer at home because I have to hold that shift key down. I have 20 years of holding a shift key down. That is not going to be rewired for me. But you guys are early on. You don't have to worry about the shift keys. If I say shift key to constrain proportions on this one, you don't actually have to now, which is super nice. But with the free transform, it is a little bit easier. And this is for Illustrator too. Grab it from one of the corners, because if you grab it from here, sometimes, now it's doing it fine for here, but in Illustrator, it will shift the proportions out of whack. So it's easier to use it from the corner. And then, where's my mouse? Come on, mouse. Let's go back into this and be like, I pushed this a little bit too far. There's a history. So once upon a forever ago, Photoshop only had 1 to 3 ondos. Now you can have, I think, up to like 40 or whatever you set it for at home. Or you can just go through and use your history. If you click back further, it'd be like, ooh, yeah, you know what? I really don't want that. I'm going to stay right where this was. Once I start working again, all of this is going to get rewritten. So we're back basically. So I could be like, do I want it where I open or where I did that first brightness contrast? I'm going to keep it there for the next couple of these, but you can step multiple back. So I only had 2, 4, 6, 8 of these. That's early on. You can easily have 200 in your history, so you'll be able to step really far back with this. So your history is going to come in handy also. Vibrance is a weird one. You know those Instagram photos where you're like, why is that water so blue? That field looks particularly green. Why is that mountain purple? They're probably playing around with vibrance and saturation. Vibrance all the way up. I'll tell you what, I'm just going to show you with a field. That'll make life easier. Mountain. Let's do a mountain today. Sure. Great. All right. I'm going to drag that into Photoshop. So I want to make this my Instagram inspirational post du jour. But I want that blue to be like regurgitatingly vibrantly blue. So I'm going to up that vibrance. I'm going to up that saturation. You can see where and it starts looking weird if you go all the way up on both of these. That blue is going to be blue. The purples are going to be purple. The pinks are going to be pink. If you take it all away, let me take it back to 0 on both of these. If I take the vibrance away, it's going to be a little bit more dull. If I take the saturation away, you're going to have one of our many ways of making a grayscale black and white. So fully desaturated is going to be, just black and white. Fully saturated, you're going to have those weird Instagram inspirational post things. If you want to be really crazy, you can really boost both. What I would recommend, it's sort of one of those things like our eyes will notice that a little bit is better than all the bits. So this looks kind of like maybe it could be real. It's just distorted enough, basically. But the saturation, if you boost that up, that can be a lot of fun. And there's also a black and white here, so you can do our black and white adjustments from this menu as well. Now we know we had a lot of blues in this, and this is different than just going to, and I'm just going to cancel out. You can go to mode grayscale. Yeah, okay, it's grayscale, perfect. Then I could do my curves and all that and fix it from there. Or if I go to the black and white, you get a little bit more adjustability. So maybe in my cyans, oop, too much. We could let's do that. Let's darken it up so you can see there's a lot of cyans in there. So if I wanted just a little bit more value push and a little bit more value push, you can get really finite control. I'm going to call these the Ansel Adams. Just simply doing a grayscale convert's fine, but if you want to get in there and really boost and play around with that contrast, you're going to be able to. So, okay, wasn't much happening there, but ooh, that looks good going this way. So you can push the value ranges way further if you use that mode for converting. All right, I'm going to go back. What was our next ones? Color balance. It's maybe a little blue. Which is going to be logical because we just really messed up with the blue. Color balance is going to say, and this is how I deal with it. Someone said, how do you know what color to do? You look at the piece and you go, my gosh, that's really blue. You're starting at blue. So you go, I don't want blue, so let's put a little bit of yellow into it. I don't want the blue, let's put a little bit of red into it. And it's just going to dull that down just a little bit. I'm going to go really extreme so you can see it. So then you can also, if you want to do special effects and get them more like the nostalgic style builds, you can do them through this also. And I'm just going to take each back up to 0 so we can see it. That was just doing the midtones. You can also do just the shadows. Actually, that looks pretty decent. Lucky first grab. And then you can boost just maybe the highlights. So it's the same thing as the black and white. You can go all sorts of crazy. You can use it to make it an accurate representation, or you can use these to make it more of a special effect. So if you wanted more of a pinkish looking mountain, and this looks really off on the screen. Our projectors never quite look right. But you can adjust the colors and give it more of a haze. So if you're going for like 70s nightclub, it would be pink. But if you're going for like 70s bad film, it's going to look more like something like this. So you can actually make the adjustments look like whatever mood or tone you're aiming for in your piece. So you can have a lot of fun with these. So like all things, like when you take the photo class, it's going to be like you're making the photo accurately. But when you're in the design classes, you can be like, I'm going to make this pink, all of it. So you can go all sorts of crazy with this. You can also invert these. So you're like, oh, geez, okay, why would I ever do that? One, you could have it as a special effect, toss it on another layer and play around with layer styles. You can do samplings with it. Maybe you're like, wow, you know what? I needed this sort of gradiated ombre looking thing. Now I could use that in a piece. Or our photo people, if you converted it to that black and white and you're like, I want to do a contact print of my design, you invert it, print it on acetate or some sort of clear film, then you just do a contact print over in the studio. So you go to the photo lab with your printouts and you can do your designs. What's nice with that is you can do type, etc. in here, do collages, etc., but get a traditional output with it. So remember, we tend to think of the traditional going into the digital, but what happens when the digital can be turned into traditional? So don't rule that aspect of Photoshop out either. Let's see, where were we at? Oh, come on, mouse. We have our one cat. We have a weird background, and I'll just copy and paste this cat in there. Command A, copy, paste. All right. Free transform, Command T. Yeah, I guess I'll do all of it. We'll see how that goes. And I'm going to edit, transform, flip him horizontally because I want the cat to not be overlapping the other cat. So now for this part, and then I'm going to set you loose. Layer management. So nothing's on our layer one. No, wait, that was our brushes. Double click, brushes. Layer 2 was our weird texture. Layer 3, crazy cat. And then normal cat. Half cat. I'll call him half cat instead. Why it's important to start naming things. It's fine to not name your layers, I suppose, if it's just you working. I do it out of habit just because, you know, I worked on teams for so long. Why make it crazy and disorganized for anyone? If it's me, yeah, I guess you can get away with it because you can kind of see, well, you saw I did forget what that was. You can kind of see what's going on, but it's nice to have the naming system with it. There is something in Photoshop that takes probably the longest to get used to, and it's called layer organization. It's once you get a lot of them, we're going to learn how to group them. They have to be named, and then that way you can find them relatively quickly. If I'm working in a corporation and there's 10 of us on this team, let's say I start the file in the morning, but then you come in at like 11 and I have to switch jobs. So I pass the file off to you, you pass it off to the next person who comes in at 3. There could be easily 10 of us working on the same file. If they are not named, you will, I promise, drive someone crazy. Because when I worked at the one paper, the one guy did every car ad for some reason in Photoshop. He had like 300 layers and nothing was named. And one day he was sick and I had to take his account over. And I couldn't figure anything out because it was pure chaos. So grouping in that case is useful, and then naming on top of it. And then whoever subs for you can do that. So just keep that in mind. That is super handy. You can hide the layers. You can lock the layers. You can unlock and then hide. So let's just go through each of these quickly. Our brushes had that saturation. Let's do something crazy with our textures. And this is, again, just you looking at something and going, great, I love it. Crazy cat, and then half cat. Pulls it all together. That looks awful, but I love monstrous amalgamations on demo day. So each layer you can do something different with. You can keep adjusting it until the cows come home. You can then keep going and morphing it further and further and further. You can add more textures. You could put on some patterns. That's going to be absolutely endless. For Photoshop, you can flatten all of these. Once your layers are flat, that's it. You can't do any more. So I never flatten my native file. So the native file, remember, is that file, the .psd. So untitled 1. Let's save it. Save. .psd test. I'm going to put it on my desktop with a Command D. Then I can put it wherever I need to go. I would never change this file. Here's the nice thing. InDesign and Illustrator now recognizes Photoshop layers. So honestly, I almost never now change it from the PSD. So if I'm in InDesign doing something, I double click on it, it opens in Photoshop, I change it, I save it, I go back into InDesign, the changes are already done. So there's almost now no reason to flatten your file unless your client is specifically asking for it. So to flatten files, you would actually go down and just flatten image. Everything's now a background. I cannot edit this. If I hit save, I'm done. I can't do anything else with this. Let's go back, because remember, our history will save us from that problem, and then we can keep all of these layers. So for our experiments today, that's going to be the key word, just experiment. So this first stage, the project that I'm giving for the in-class, I'm going to get one light on, is actually going to give you the stipulations like we were a client. So you use this title, this album name, and this photo. And how we're going to get it is to have it all randomly generated. 2, 3, 4, 5. They're sticking together. I'll catch the extras on the end. So you can, for the last couple minutes, just get the title, get the album, get the image, and then on Tuesday, we're going to actually start assembling these and putting them together, because I'll go over selections a little bit more. I lost count. I'll grab the end of these also. So this one is actually a purely randomized CD cover. I use this, you'll see this again, I promise you. I use it in every class, and when you see it in Design 3, you're like, oh no, what to do now? I use this a lot. This is this sort of project is, and I'm going to assume we've all had a problem. We get excited. It's a new program. We open it up and we create. What do we create? What should I make today? I have no idea. This is what I have people fall back on those times when you want to work and do something, but you're like, ugh, I'm not quite sure what I want to make. This is nice because it gives you 3 things to follow. You're like, I have no control over this, and then I just have to make these things look awesome, basically. So we're going to make a square. It's an 8x8 document, and then you're also going to open it up in your web browser. This is where you actually are going to get your content. Thank you. From our friend Wikipedia. So for this, I don't have this hyperlink that's on paper, of course. So you literally will have to type in http://en.wikipedia.org/wiki/special:_random. Type it in exactly like that. I will do that as we speak. This is going to be your band name. This is the band name, right? Yes. All right, so please give me something PC. PG-13. Let's see. en.wikipedia.org/wiki/special:_random. That is my album name, or my band name. What is this person? Northwestern's president. All right, awesome. So he is now my band. So now what we need to find is, you can either use the quotations page. The quotations page was giving us problems yesterday. You can just go to quotationpage.com, and the link here now works better than the other one. Scroll all the way down the last 4 or 5 words of the very last quote. This is the title of my album. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So It Won't Fall Down is my album name. If you're having trouble, there's also that InspiroBot. That one can be kind of mean, so take that one with a grain of salt if you use that one. And then our last one is going to be our album cover, which is Flickr.com, which we just sort of saw. Explore interesting 7 days. Oh, I spelled it wrong. It's going to give an angry stop days. The third photo, no matter what it is, click, is your album. Yeah. So this is one of those things. This is purely an exercise. You're never going to make money off of this. If the photo is not downloadable, all right, this one looks like it will have. You can get it through the downloads, or you might want to write this down somewhere. Shift-Command-4 is going to be our screenshot. And then you just click and drag over the photo. So there's my album cover. This is my album name. Where is it? Oh, here is Henry. And Henry Noyes, I don't know, he's my musician that I'm designing for. So here's what this does. One's required, but at the end of the term, I will accept up to 5 for extra credit points due on the last class. Because these you can have so much fun with, just as a heads up. So for the last 7 minutes, you might want to get your band name and your title. Just write it down on your piece of paper or your sketchbook. If you have extra time, you can get the actual photo. And then on Tuesday, we're going to assemble it. But we have 7 minutes. You can definitely get those two in the meanwhile. That way it's two less. I like this one on. That way it's two less things to do on Tuesday.